This overview of the software development lifecycle framework is designed for IT project managers, business analysts, technical writers, and collaborating organizations who may all participate in defining an SDLC process and the creation of associated documentation for your organization. It does not delve into the nuances and helpful details of each SDLC phase, but rather illustrates in broad terms the entire cycle as to the purpose of each phase and step in relation to required documentation. Information is provided on the following topics. What is SDLC? Goals of SDLC, the different SDLC models, the various SDLC phases including project initiation, requirements definition, testing, and production turnover. Examples are shown of each phase with illustrations of typical tools and forms you will require in any SDLC process you develop. Depending on the size and function of your IT department, you may find you are only interested in the bare essentials of the SDLC process discussed herein. However, if you represent a medium to large or even enterprise IT shop, the scope of the information presented herein will be invaluable to you. Corporate governance has become paramount in any efforts to develop applications, as applications must comply with the COBIT Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology, Standard Framework for Information Technology, IT Governance, Accounting Controls, and Compliance. Finally, you will be directed to sources of material to create your own customized SDLC process. The software development lifecycle is the primary methodology program management adopts to determine the feasibility and develop, test, and maintain information systems or applications to satisfy strategic objectives and business goals. One must be aware that SDLC is not executed in a vacuum. When developing an SDLC process, one must fully integrate your SDLC process and collaborate with the needs of COBIT, internal and external auditors, other critical IT organizations such as infrastructure, and even your user community, who are not only impacted by your choices, but must understand and fully participate in the process. The SDLC process requires hard, painstaking thought and extensive and practical planning as it is applied to the specific needs of your organization. Remember that one size does not fit all. The goals of SDLC are all logical. Develop a project structure and organization to ensure that projects are managed consistently and effectively over the entire organization. Deliver applications when promised and within budget. Refining the process over time to be measurable and repeatable. Ensure that all stakeholders in any project, including development, QA, infrastructure, IT governance, auditors, and especially the business community, are all educated in and fully support the process. SDLC helps to achieve these goals by establishing appropriate levels of management authority, documenting requirements and maintaining traceability. Ensure that all projects are developed within the management approved process, and identify at risk projects and apply management resources to implement corrective action before these risks become major problems. As the world of IT has become more complex with the need to incorporate requirements for evolving technologies and collaborating organizations and to satisfy regulatory bodies, including IT governance, internal and external auditors, and outside government agencies, the need for very thorough considerations and enhanced SDLC documentation has become paramount in the successful delivery of an application. With more demands and scrutiny on IT management than ever before, Documentation Consultants has expanded the traditional waterfall model to more finely delineate the phases of project initiation, planning, requirements definition, system design and development, testing and acceptance, installation, production turnover, and post-production or maintenance phases to more accurately reflect today's real-world environment. Note that both of these models only depict traditional development, although other methodologies such as Agile are in wide use. The logical sequence required to successfully develop and maintain and eventually retire an application consists of 8 phases. Project initiation. Is the project worthwhile? Is the project cost justifiable? Will the return on investment be realized in reduced labor or actually add to the company's bottom line? Planning. Define the business goals, potential risks, and management direction. Prepare detailed cost estimates for IT costs, development costs, and potentially a project capital versus expense estimate. Requirements definition. This is where you precisely define the business and functional requirements for the application, wherein the functional requirements document the inputs, behavior, and outputs. This effort in many ways is the most important phase of the project, for if you don't allocate sufficient time, personnel, and resources to this phase, the rest of the project may become a management nightmare. So make sure you have personnel who exceed in writing these documents. Design and development. Once you have the business and functional requirements carefully defined, you will now move to developing systems requirement specifications and technical requirements. Many companies often bypass this important step, moving directly into development. This approach will generally work if the project is relatively small and you have seasoned developers who can interpret the business requirements and develop applications in accordance with rigid department standards. However, if your projects tend to run from medium to large, you run the risk of developers not being fully aware of all system requirements, necessitating costly rework downstream. Continuing with SDLC phases, testing and acceptance. This phase incorporates the development of at least a system test and user acceptance test plan, wherein the system test plan is used to test system requirements via unit, system, and integration testing. The user acceptance test plan is generally executed by a dedicated quality assurance staff or by the users themselves, identifying precisely documented errors or anomalies that will require rework. This testing verifies that the test application meets or exceeds the business, functional, and technical requirements for the project. Installation. Regardless of the size of your organization, as a minimum, you will need a user guide as either a printed document or as online help, and a system administration guide for production support personnel to support the application. Production turnover. Most organizations have adopted a combination of a production implementation plan, which documents all elements of the production process, and a production turnover approval document, which requests approval from all stakeholders prior to placing an application into production. Post-production. Post-production or maintenance includes a change control process to document and approve all changes to production, wherein many organizations utilize a change control board to oversee this process. Now we'll examine each phase in more detail. The project initiation phase objective is to justify the project. As a minimum, you will want to create a business case document identifying if there is value to the project, and if so, then perhaps create a feasibility study to determine economic potential and practicality of a project. If viable, you will then immediately want to create a project team of stakeholders to manage the project. Typical forms you will need include the business case document, which documents the purpose, sponsors and stakeholders, benefits, risks and assumptions, recommendations, alternatives, key milestones, critical success factors, related projects, and a high-level cost estimate and identification of necessary resources. The feasibility study identifies the objective scope, system or operational details, deliverables and end product, and the analysis, solutions, and alternatives. The planning phase means you're starting to get serious about moving forward on a project. The most critical document you need to develop is the project charter, which briefly encapsulates the business goals and objectives. You may also want to develop a required approvals document defining who approves each document, task, or phase, and a roles and responsibilities matrix defining the responsibilities for each individual across every functional department. The most critical document is the project plan. Besides the business requirements document, this is the next most critical tool used to define tasks, resources, and schedule milestones for assigning tasks and tracking and determining variances. The project charter can often be shown as a one-page executive summary for the eyes of senior management and sponsors. At a glance, identifying the business case, opportunity, and goal, the project scope, in and out scope items, the project team and stakeholders, high-level project milestones, and projected costs. The project plan depicts the assigned task, duration of the task, completion percentage of each task, any predecessors required for completion before that task can be accomplished, the resource name, and other attributes. This data that is normally updated on a frequent basis becomes the foundation for periodic status reports to IT management, collaborating organizations, and especially the business sponsors and business units. A project organization chart informs everyone who the key players are on any given project. The project risk analysis identifies those critical risks that can sabotage a project. However, potentially more important is determining the cost of development and the project itself, and deciding how the project will be funded either by capital or expense. The project organization chart depicts the project name, the project managers, sponsors, stakeholders, business analysts, and collaborating organization, so all project participants know who to contact when issues arise. Management will need to allocate funds for the project as well as defining the breakdown of capital versus expense costs to fund the project. 23. The requirements definition phase is the phase where you define the requirements for the application, including business and functional requirements and use cases. The functional requirements are almost mandatory before developers start coding if design documentation is not developed. The business requirements are the key to a successful project. If adequate resources and time are not allocated to this step, a disaster can easily befall you when testing occurs downstream. Within this document, you will capture the project description, goals, stakeholders, assumptions and dependencies, risks, high-level estimated costs, explanation of the current versus future state, system interfaces, and infrastructure requirements. The use cases walk management and develops through typical scenarios of how your customer will use each feature that is incorporated into the application. Within this document, you will capture individual use cases defining how a user interacts with the system and the expected system response, and how the system accomplished that response. The design and development phase is where you will define the application design via system requirement specifications or a technical requirements document. Users may also find the templates for a user interface design or report design very informative, as well as a website planning checklist to ensure that consideration has been given to all possible elements in a website design. The technical requirements describe the information that's required to meet business user needs by capturing functional and non-functional requirements, including any calculations, technical details, data manipulations, and other specific functionality, infrastructure and related requirements, and system, hardware, software, and communications interfaces. The user interface design template provides detailed business and technical information for the design and development of a user interface, including a system overview, screen details, tables and databases involved, assumptions, and dependencies. The testing and acceptance phase focuses on development of a system test and user acceptance test plans to assure management and the user community that the project is on target and will deliver on promises. The user acceptance test plan provides management with an overview of the system, application, functions, and features that will be tested. The results of testing will provide information and guidance to management, personnel, and the user community that the application works as expected and ensures a high level of confidence. The project acceptance document is a tool for stakeholders to buy off on an application to prevent a particular stakeholder from raising alarm bells in the future about failures of the application. The installation phase consists of documentation of the final product in order that the process used in the application development is well documented. The application can be installed. Users have instructions for using all system features on a daily basis, and a system administration guide is prepared for production support personnel to provide technical support for the application. Process guide provides instructions, procedures, and process flows normally shown in a graphics mode for an application. A software user guide provides information for using a system, application, or specific process. It defines the major components, functions, and features of the application, tasks, and navigation keys and steps for the user community. The production turnover phase consists of carefully documenting the steps that are required to place a fully tested system or application into production, while the production turnover approval is used to obtain approval from all stakeholders before the application or modification is placed into production. The production implementation plan defines the objectives, impacted devices, production delivery, activities, technical support information, software components and implementation steps, hardware components and steps, rollback and contingency steps, required user training and documentation, and emergency contacts. The production turnover approval is often executed by a change control board that provides a process to ensure changes to the production environment are planned, approved, communicated, tested, executed, and reviewed in a systematic manner. The post-production phase consists of actions that may be desired, including obtaining feedback from stakeholders to improve subsequent projects, documenting a disaster recovery plan, documenting a requested modification via a change control request, accomplish regression testing when any modifications have been incorporated into production. When the application is no longer used, retiring the application. Change control request documents the reason for the change, project budget and schedule impacts, and spaces for obtaining approval from all stakeholders. The regression testing plan defines why regression testing is necessary, the systems or applications affected, functional business areas affected, and the testing timeline. Within the document, the test environment is clearly defined. Detailed test instructions are provided by step with the expected results and pass-fail indicators and any defects delineated. Corporate or IT governance has become a major player in the development of applications, often to the annoyance of project managers. Since 2002, when Sarbanes-Oxley was passed by Congress to correct the evils of corporate America with the scandals that cost investors billions of dollars based on the actions of WorldCom and other out-of-control major corporations. COBIT, Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology, adds to the cost of an application, but they do contain a framework assuring accounting, controls, and compliance that hopefully will mitigate risks. When you are ready to implement your own SDLC process, you can opt to develop the necessary framework of documents and the process internally, or you can turn to a tried and proven method developed by the executives, project managers, and technical writers of documentation consultants by purchasing one of our scalable packages of forms and templates for the cost of a few dollars per form. From that baseline, you can customize the forms to conform to your specific organization. You can review the details of each package by going to www.sdlcforms.com/packages. If you do not find a perfect match on any of the packages, you can always create your own package by going to www.sdlcforms.com. Good luck on your venture into the world of SDLC.